Hi, Teacher Writing Online. It is week 11. So, for Teaching Without Walls this week, I've returned to the community garden that I was a part of, that I've introduced you to before. I thought I'd pull up a chair here and sit in the beautiful sun. It's a lovely day. And talk about week 11. So, week 11 is another opportunity to really get ready for what will be 2 weeks into 3 weeks of intense design work that we're all going to do together. So, so this week I want to kick off our work by asking all of us to think about the metaphors that we're taking into our design work. What kind of metaphors drive your thinking about, and your designing, about teaching and learning in general? And how are these metaphors influencing the ways that you might design for teaching writing online specifically? So I would argue that there are lots of really bad metaphors out there for teaching that really, I think are problematic in terms of, the ways we talk about gaps, the ways we talk about measurement, the ways we talk about knowledge, who has knowledge, and whose knowledge is important, and why, how it is that we separate and track and generally set learning and teaching often up as a race or a comparison. I tend to think a lot of the metaphors that we use in education really direct us in those directions. And instead, I'm personally really interested in metaphors of learning and visions of learning and of education that are more like the garden here, that are more related to growth and to individuality and to struggle in many ways, and to, if you've ever been a gardener, to the learning and the frustration and the trying again kind of work that has to happen here, and also in a community space like this, the communal work that has to be in place to support this in happening. Anyway, I could go on about this, but I do think that the garden is a powerful place to really think about teaching and learning, and I find it particularly helpful. So this week I just want to invite you to think about the metaphors that you use when you're thinking about teaching and learning. I shared a resource from John Marrow from previous, he's retired now I think, but was at PBS NewsHour, and he has some other metaphors to suggest, and you might have a bunch of metaphors to that you like to play with too. So let's share our metaphors with each other. You can work individually or you can work in small groups. Then we'll do that on VoiceThread. And then this week I also made a very long list of resources. So some of them are new. We haven't really looked at them together yet this semester. So there's a few new ones there. I also made links to ones that I have shared before, because I don't know if you really had much time to dig into them. There are some resources that are particular to teaching writing online, and then there's resources that are more oriented towards teaching online in general, or to curricular design in general. So I wanted to offer all of those and let you sort of dig through a set of resources. Some might be more or less helpful to you, I realize, so pick and choose what seems best. I also want us to socially co-curate a Padlet together. So I created a blank Padlet, and I'm inviting all of us to start to add resources there that we think are helpful for us, as well as those that might be helpful for others. Feel free to start to create categories too of resources that you add there if you want to do that. But let's share the things that we all think are helpful. Again, this is related to this metaphor of teaching. If I believe as the instructor that we all have resources and ideas and thoughts that we can take from each other. I shouldn't be the only one sharing resources. We should be sharing, creating, co-curating resources together. So a Padlet is one way to do that. You might want to consider this this approach in your own context. So in order to consider it, let's just give it a try together, okay? So spend some time with the Padlet, and I'm suggesting that you really actually first spend some time going back over things that we've learned this semester. Take a look at your blog posts, take a look at your classmates' blog posts, look at your self-assessments. Go back, spend this week as a sort of reflective week. Where have you been? What are the implications of what you've been thinking about? How can you start to pull these together? What resources might you share out of that will help you work towards your final project and will potentially help others? Since you've been connecting with others, you know some of their needs and their interests too. So go back and do a bunch of review of where we've been, think about where we're going, think about the metaphors you're using, pull together the resources that you need to do the work that you need to do, and let's focus there this week. Weeks 12 and 13 will really be focused on design work and prototyping, so all of this is a setup for that. Okay? And then finally, this is actually the week for our fourth self-assessment. And we are going to assess the ways that we are starting to design for teaching writing online. And we've been doing sort of mini design work all along the way. So really look back at what you've been doing and use your reflections on that to do, and the guidelines that I provided to do your self-assessment. These self-assessments are actually critical for your final evaluation and final assessment from me too in this class. So let me know if you're running late with the self-assessments, because they are so important. Okay. I think that's it for now. I'm really excited to see where we go with these metaphors. And one other thing, I included a link to Project Zero's thinking routines. Sometimes I find these routines very helpful in giving response to things that aren't so that are more like a metaphor, that are not so linear, or maybe are a little harder to grasp. And I think some of these thinking routines can be really helpful. I've used them with visual arts as well as with writing. So anyway, I made a link to the Thinking Routines toolbox that Project Zero has put together. It's quite extensive, and it's actually a great resource also to take a look at and see if there are things in there that you might actually use for your own practice. I suggested one of the routines that we could use as it's sort of a protocol for how we could respond to each other's metaphors. But if that doesn't quite fit, go ahead and feel free to ask for some other response or some other feedback. Okay? All right, thanks so much, and have a great week ahead.